Matthew Dickerson is with us again, talking technology. We always talk technology here, Matthew. How are you?
Yeah, we always do talk tech, Chris, and it's great to be chatting tech and great to be on 2WEB.
Now, let's start with garbage trucks. They're very noisy and garbage bins are smelly. Is there a modern alternative to rubbish bins along the footpath, Matthew?
There is, and it sounds incredibly complicated, but in new developments, new suburbs, for example, it sounds like a pretty good sort of way to go about it. There's actually up in Queensland on the Sunshine Coast, there's one council that's actually done a rollout where they've effectively put huge pipes under the ground, and then you've got little pipes that will come up to each of the garbage deposit spots along the actual road. And in any buildings that are along there, you can put rubbish into a bin rather than having a skip bin a wheelie bin and wheel that out. You basically have a bin that takes all that rubbish down into these tubes under the ground. It's a vacuum tube system, and when they activate the system, twice a day it occurs, rubbish goes along there at about 70 kilometres an hour and then moves into a central deposit spot. Now that sounds fantastic, but you can imagine retrofitting suburbs, retrofitting any areas where you've got to go and lay all these pipes, and they're fairly large pipes because you've got to make sure rubbish doesn't get stuck in those pipes. So retrofitting some of those areas is fairly expensive. This particular area up around Maroochydore, there's only been 6 kilometres of pipe laid. $21 million was the cost for this particular little rollout there. So it's not something that I can see rolling out everywhere, not something I can see in certain areas that are already fairly congested with a lot of pipes under the ground. But in newer states, I can see this being a pretty good idea.
All right, now everyone wants to build a better mousetrap, and haven't some towns been affected with the mice this summer, and Canamble springs to mind. Is it possible to create a whiter white paint?
This is a very confusing story for me, Chris. I thought white was white. I didn't know there were grades of white. But apparently some researchers have been working on whiter white paint. Now, they actually had a breakthrough last year in October. They came up with the whitest white paint to that point in time, where it reflected about 95.5% of the UV and light that hit it from the sun. But they want to work on higher white than that. So they've got to the point now where their newest whiter white paint is 98.1% reflection. Now that's almost as good as the blackest black paint, which is 99.9% of visible light absorbed by the blackest black paint. Now, why would you want whiter white paint, I ask, and I ask the same question. And the idea is that if we can have more reflection of sunlight, if we can have more reflection of heat, then essentially you can have an area, a house, for example, or an office building that's cooler. So you can spend less money on trying to cool that particular building, and therefore you're burning fewer greenhouse gases. So it's all about trying to save the environment. The only thing I'm a little bit confused about is I would think having the whitest white paint would be good in summer, but in winter I'd actually want more heat coming in. So what I really want is the whitest white paint in summer and then the blackest black paint in winter, and some way to automatically change between the two. I don't want much, I know, but that's where we're headed in technology in terms of research around paint, Chris.
Your paint is going to be making money out of you. Okay, moving on to Spotify. It's well known for its virtual streaming service. Why is Spotify about to venture into the hardware space?
I have no idea why they want to go in hardware space. When you've got a software tool, when you've got a streaming tool, making hardware is a pretty hard thing to do. You've got to go and get it manufactured and the logistics of that and then shipping it out, and you've got stock control. Spotify doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff at the moment, but they've created this new hardware device called, and I think the marketing department was on holidays the day that they came up with the name, it's called the Car Thing. That's it. It's called the Car Thing. And all it is basically an interface between your phone and your car. So it allows you to change songs, go to playlists, all sorts of things you would do on your phone normally if you're using Spotify, but using the Car Thing to do it. It's obviously designed to be just a single-use tool. It's got a big knob on it, so it's almost like an old-fashioned radio where you've got a knob where you can actually move between playlists with that knob or move among all your playlists with that knob. You've got some good old-fashioned buttons on there, like a push-button radio. You can actually push to various presets that you have set up on there. And, of course, it's got a touchscreen on it as well. So the idea here is you clip that into, say, one of your vents on your car, you jump in your car, it automatically connects up to your phone, connects to your car stereo, and you use that as an interface between the two. I must admit, I can't see these rushing out the door. Spotify might realise that maybe getting into hardware isn't such a good idea after all. But anyway, that's where it's at the moment. Spotify coming up with a hardware product. Keep an eye out for the car thing.
We're talking technology with Matthew Dickerson, moving from Spotify to Google. Now, Google needs a team of lawyers almost as big as its team of engineers. How has Google fared in the Australian Federal Court, Matthew?
Well, we've had a win over Google. Australia had a little win over Google. Essentially, this is a world-first ruling where nowhere else in the world has won a case like this. Essentially, the Australian Federal Court has ruled that Google has misled customers or consumers. So that's a pretty big deal. It's all to do with their location data. And Google said that if you turn off your location data, you turn off your tracking settings on your phone, that's it. You won't track your location anymore. But of course, they were still tracking your location. They just didn't tell you they were tracking the location. And Google, which kind of makes sense to me, the Federal Court, which makes sense to me, said that this seems a little bit misleading if you've said you've done something and you haven't done it. So there is another spot to go in your settings to try and finally turn off your location tracking. But again, most people aren't aware of that. And most people would think that if you turn off location tracking, that's it. So the chairman of the ACCC, Rod Sims, was pretty happy with this because, again, you don't take on the likes of an international huge organisation like Google lightly. And then you can imagine the team of solicitors they would have turned up with. It's not really about beating Australia in this case. They don't really care about Australia. We're such a small percentage of the overall market for Google. But this will open up, I think, a series of cases around the world where they're doing the same thing around the world. They're obviously misleading customers in the same way. And once Australian Federal Court has had success over Google, then there might be some other countries around the world, the equivalent of the ACCCs in other countries, that have had similar complaints that might want to take on Google as well.
I like this next topic. The next generation of smart speakers are coming out. Would you be happy to let a smart speaker watch you sleep?
Sounds a bit creepy, doesn't it? We seem to be a bit obsessed with smart speakers in this nation. 600,000 smart speakers we added to our homes last year. 2.8 million homes across the nation have got some form of smart speaker. And these are ones from Amazon with their Echo or Google or even the Apple HomePod. So you've got 3 different companies producing them and all competing with different options. And we see them in lounge rooms and kitchens and home offices, but you're starting to get them in bedrooms now. And that makes sense. It can be used as an alarm clock, for example. But the latest iterations of them are saying, well, if we've got them in bedrooms, what else can we do? So they now have this light radar technology and a sense to allow them to see how you're breathing through the night. So you can have it sitting there beside your bed. In the morning when you wake up, you're not sure how you feel for the day, so you can ask your smart assistant, your smart speaker, and it will tell you how you slept, how much you moved around, how your chest was moving up and down, whether it was a nice even breathing you had through the night, Chris, or whether it was a bit erratic in that breathing. So they're starting to invade all sorts of parts of our house, including our bedroom. Now, they are pretty cool. I mean, I use them in my house, use them in my office, control lights, control TV stations, all sorts of things. But it just gets to the stage when you start thinking there's another person in the house, and when they start watching you sleep at night, they just get onto that almost a bit too creepy side.
I've got sleep apnea, so there might be some improvements in that space with the smart speakers. Very interesting, Matthew.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Now, green energy is good for the environment, but is it good for the economy?
Well, that's the ongoing debate, isn't it? Everyone talks about this whole thing. If we start using renewables, if we start using green energy, that's going to be terrible. It's going to destroy our entire coal-based economy that we have at the moment, which is not entirely coal-based, but we certainly generate a few dollars out of coal. Certainly the ALP has come out, Anthony Albanese has pledged a jobs revolution based on clean energy. And this is in direct contrast, obviously, to the opposition, who seem to be focused on a little bit of coal energy. But Anthony Albanese said that there's a $15 billion national recovery fund that's centred on clean energy. And basically what he's saying here is there are job opportunities in clean energy. Some people talk about the fact that we want to forget about all this clean energy. We just want to keep burning coal because that's what the economy is based on. But I think the point that Anthony's making here is that if we just go down that path, at some point down the future, we're going to run out of stuff to dig up, and then where are we? So let's take advantage of all this clean energy. let's face it, in Australia we've got a lot of sun, we've got a lot of land. There's no reason we couldn't start to export energy. And I know down in Tasmania they're looking at how they might, for example, create clean hydrogen, use renewable energy to create hydrogen, extract hydrogen. So there are certainly opportunities like that. But it's good to see at least someone in government talking about the fact that this whole clean energy future could be the future for Australia in terms of our economy going forward.
All right, Matthew, we will leave it there. We will look out for you on YouTube. Just search Matthew Dickerson. Have a good week. Talk to you next week.
Thanks, Chris. Chat next week.